Hello and welcome to another Looney Tunes review video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe to follow my journey to review all 1000 classic Looney Tunes shorts and give this video a like as well. So this is a review for Porky's Poultry Plant, released in 1936. It's the 140th in the series and it's directed by Frank Tashlin. You can find this short on the Looney Tunes Golden Collection Volume 4 DVD set and on the Porky Pig 101 DVD set. A HD version is out there. Hopefully they'll release that on disc soon. So, in case you haven't seen this one, because it's under copyright, I can't show you the full cartoon here, but it's pretty straightforward. Porky's on a farm. I mean, I think most of his shorts where he has a job, he's pretty much a farmer anyway. So he's on a farm, he's feeding the chickens, but of course we've got the dastardly either hawk or a buzzard, I don't know, there seems to be confusion there, and they take one of the chickens away and Porky hops in his plane and goes after the hawk or buzzard, whatever it is. So yeah, pretty straightforward in terms of story, but hey, it is a short after all. So first you're going to hear a re-edit of the original audio commentary I did before I take that down. You'll then hear some new thoughts from me, and then you'll hear from my good friend and self-professed, I guess, Tashlin-holic or something along those lines, my good friend Austin Kelly. So sit back, relax, grab some popcorn and enjoy the first short of one of the best Looney Tunes directors of all time. Yeah, this is Frank Tashlin's first cartoon, so we've hit another milestone, which is pretty good. Also, look at the musical score by Carl Starling, who had just come from the Iwerks studio, and before that he helped start off the Silly Symphonies for Disney. It does meander a little bit in the beginning, I feel, but it is setting things up. It's okay, that was a cute little gag there. But once we actually start getting into the main story about the actual hawk, yeah, that's when things really kick up into high gear. So and here's one of the weirdest gags I've seen, and it works so well. Porky just happens to have a fighter plane. I know that certain farmers would have like maybe a crop duster or something, but it's a poultry farm, and why would he have this? I don't know. We'll just go with it. I just think it's amusing. Then all of a sudden, it just turns into this. Like in a football game, and the rooster starts announcing things. So it's a really good way to just really build things up. There's the buzzard, and see, and stuff like that. Frank was good at, like how he would cut from that shot of the photo of the buzzard onto the actual animated one, and he would do stuff like that all the time. And one thing that I've learned to pay attention to with the Frank Tashlin ones is a lot of these quick cuts. I mean, in animation, the more shots you do, I mean, the more expensive and time-consuming it's going to be. So it was interesting in a studio like Leon Schlesinger, who was known to be a bit of a penny pincher, and yet Frank Tashlin got away with doing all these cuts. I mean, look how many cuts there are. There was like 3 cuts and there's another cut now. And admittedly, I haven't counted all the shots, but there are some cartoons where it gets even more insane with the cuts. But I also noticed that Porky actually talks a lot more in this one, and that would have been probably a real nightmare to do, given his real-life stutter. Because, yeah, I noticed in a lot of the recent Porkys, he would say maybe a few lines in the entire cartoon. In fact, in one of them, one recent one, Fishtails, he just had one line, so I could imagine it would have been annoying, and it would have been far better once Mel Blanc would come into it, where he could actually control his stutters and his different accents and all that. And yep, we're going to build a nice little grave for that. I mean, is it a buzzard or a hawk? I mean, they were saying buzzards, but then there was also saying hawk. I don't know, are they were different birds? But anyway, so those are my original thoughts. Watching this short after watching all of the Frank Tashlin shorts since I did that original commentary, going back to the first one, I was thinking, is this gonna not hold up as well? But no, this, for a first short, by first-time director, it's pretty solid. Yeah, it starts off a little bit slow, but then it just builds and builds and builds, and my good friend Austin Kelly will elaborate further about that, but essentially he sets everything up nicely, and then we get that wonderful chase scene, so to speak, at the very end. But there's a few details I did notice now. Ted Pierce actually does the voice of the rooster at the end, and I knew the voice sounded familiar, and I looked up Keith Scott's wonderful cartoon voices book, and sure enough, yes, Ted Pierce, who was typically a writer at the studio, who actually would do a lot of voices in Warner Brothers cartoons. He actually did that voice. Now, according to Michael Barrier on the audio commentary for this particular short, which you should listen to, I've mentioned before, when Michael Barrier talks, you definitely listen. The posters on the wall, when it comes to Dorothy and all those dates. So Dorothy is the name of Tashlin's first wife, and he seems to think that April 28th was the day that they met, and the other date, April 6, 1936, was the date that Tashlin apparently came back to direct in this studio. And again, my good friend Austin Kelly will go through that this was actually the second time Tashlin was at this studio. And now here's my good friend Austin Kelly. As I said, he's a bit of a Tashlin-holic, to put it lightly, so he knows his stuff when it comes to Frank Tashlin. So he's just going to give his brief thoughts on this short, and he'll give his thoughts on all the Tashlin shorts on this channel. So take it away, Austin.
Hello, everybody. Austin Kelly here. I don't know how long it's been since I have commented on some cartoons here on this fine channel, but here I am again because, and you'll learn this over time, where there's Frank Tashlin, there's Austin Kelly, because I find myself to be a very, very passionate Tashlinite, which is probably not a word or a term or anything, but I've just made it into one. Porky's Poultry Plant is definitely an interesting cartoon. And I don't mean interesting in the way that Jim Henson would use it, which meant that he thought something was bad. I actually mean that Porky's Poultry Plant is full of intrigue, not only in the really cool suspenseful story, but in its backstory as well. Most people would think that Frank Tashlin had come to the Warner Brothers studio for the first time when he started directing, but he actually had been there before he started directing, and he was an animator on those god-awful Buddy cartoons. So this was actually already his second time at Warner Brothers, which is very interesting because he would leave again and come back again, and his total number of times having left and returned to Warner's ended up totaling 3, which is probably too many. And I would like to think about what would have happened if he had just stayed the whole way through, but I digress. Like I said, Porky's Poultry Plant is full of intrigue because, unlike most directors' debuts, Porky's Poultry Plant is a very solid cartoon. There's a lot of good gags and very good pacing, and the music is obviously a very large step forward for Warner Cartoons in and of itself because Carl Stalling is making his debut as well. And on that note, I also have to say that the score on this cartoon is absolutely magnificent. Early in Stalling's career, he used a lot of J.S. Zemeckis cues that he was used to using at his previous gig at being a silent movie accompanist. Oh, I don't even know how to say that word. While playing music for silent movies at a piano in the movie theaters, Zemeckis created a lot of different music cues to be used for silent films that otherwise had no music to them. I guess that they didn't have any copyrights on them either because Stalling uses them all throughout the 30s Warner cartoons and in a lot of the Tashlins, which we'll talk about as we go on into Tashlin's chronology. You know, the more I watch films and cartoons, I sort of start to pick up on the tiny things that Tashlin did that made his films count. At the very start, we have a very interesting opening shot. We get to the Porky's Poultry Plant flag, which is obviously animated and pretty nicely as if wind is really blowing it. And then we pan down, and there's no background on the scene. Everything is animated. And so as the camera pans down to the bottom of the chicken coop, every drawing shows a different perspective of it. It's almost like 3D animation drawn traditionally. And it's tiny touches like this that make me think that Tashlin really was ahead of his time. And by the way, even though people say that Tex Avery was really the first one to make the Warner cartoons fast or funny, I think Tashlin is faster and funnier than most of Avery's contemporary works here. That claim is probably often made because people think of Avery's first cartoon that has a 3-minute climactic chase at the end. But after that, and there are some very funny fast scenes, it feels as if Avery is putting more work into the gags and the animation than he is the speed per se. The speed of a film for Avery seems to be means to an end, and he really wants his gags to be timed perfectly. With Tashlin, the gags aren't as important, but the speed and editing and cutting of a film is. And so that's why when you watch Tashlin's cartoons in the 30s, there's some cuts that are so fast you don't even realize what just happened. Kind of in the same way that Tex Avery gag goes by really fast without you registering it for another few frames. It's an interesting comparison, and one that would probably make for a really interesting future video, Anthony. But Tashlin and Avery were definitely both very good at what they were doing. Cartoons like Porky's Poultry Plant proves that. And so here's to Tashlin and many more wonderful cartoons to come, all of which I will be commenting on in the near future. So look out for that, because of course you want to hear more of what Austin Kelly has to say, right? Hopefully.
Thank you, Austin. And yes, we definitely want to have you on the channel since you're so knowledgeable on these shorts. And hey, if you're going to study someone, you're studying one of the best. So I love hearing your thoughts on these Tashlin shorts. So look, this short isn't Tashlin's best. He definitely gets better and better as he goes along, but has there been many directors where their first directorial debuts are so strong? It doesn't happen very often. One could argue Tex Avery with Gold Diggers at 49, but he allegedly had directed a few shorts before, and practically no one knows that. He wasn't even credited anyway, so I guess technically Avery would count because that's his first credited directing short. But Tashlin is of course the same here. But then you look at Chuck Jones, and if you look at Fritz Freeling, their first shorts weren't particularly that great. But in any case, this is such a very strong directorial debut. So yeah, in the beginning, it takes a little while to get started, as I've already mentioned, and the gags are more or less cutesy. There are a few interesting gags, like the rooster in the beginning doing his, of course, little crow, but then after everything's all set up and settled, it just picks up so much speed with so much camera angles, and the gags actually also become funnier too. So I would think that this was perhaps a learning experience for Tashlin. I know that he studied film himself, like he was watching a lot of films and he was applying that here, and then of course whatever he applied to animation he ended up applying to live action movies he would do in his last career, I suppose we can call it. But yeah, and it's not only just those angles, there's also some details, like look at the shadows on the duck. Would other directors even put that level of detail? I don't really think so. If you look at a lot of the shadow work as well, it's just, wow. It just blows my mind. But, as I said, there are definitely better Frank Tashlin shorts to come. But wow, what a strong start. This one actually gets an 8 out of 10 for me. It is very impressive as a first Tashlin short. And I know that the next one, which I believe is Porky, I can never say that one right. He ends up taking what he's learned in this, and he just really goes to town. So I'm looking forward to recovering that one. But that'll do it for this review. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take care.